Standing outside the Denver family court building, Sarah Martinez adjusted the vintage sapphire and diamond ring on her finger. The same ring that had disappeared from her jewelry box 3 years ago. The same ring her sister Melissa had claimed as her own during what was supposed to be the happiest day of Sarah's life. Today, as Melissa's marriage crumbled in divorce proceedings, that ring would finally come home where it belonged. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah watched through the courthouse windows as lawyers shuffled papers and her sister sat rigidly beside her attorney. Melissa had no idea what was coming. For 28 years, Sarah had been the overlooked sister, the one who cleaned up messes while Melissa collected praise. But sometimes, patience and persistence create the most beautiful justice of all. Growing up in the suburbs of Phoenix, Sarah Martinez learned early that love in the Ramirez household came with conditions. While her younger sister Melissa received affection freely, Sarah discovered that parental attention required achievement, sacrifice, and often complete invisibility when Melissa needed to shine. The pattern established itself when Sarah was 6 and Melissa 4. Their grandmother Rosa had given Sarah a beautiful porcelain doll for Christmas, complete with a hand-sewn dress and tiny leather shoes. Sarah treasured the doll, spending hours combing its silky hair and creating elaborate tea parties in her bedroom. 3 days after Christmas, Melissa decided she wanted the doll too. Within an hour of Melissa's tears and dramatic protests, their mother Carmen gently suggested that Sarah should share her special gift. "Mija, you're the big sister," Carmen had said, kneeling beside Sarah's bed where she clutched the doll protectively. "Melissa is still learning how to share. You can show her how to be generous and kind." Sarah handed over the doll, watching as Melissa's tears instantly transformed into triumphant giggles. By evening, the porcelain face had a chip on the cheek, and the hand-sewn dress was torn from rough play. When Sarah pointed out the damage, her father Miguel simply shrugged and said, "Accidents happen." That night, as Sarah lay in her bed listening to Melissa playing with the now broken doll in the next room, she made her first crucial realization about her place in the family hierarchy. Her needs, her feelings, and her possessions were always negotiable when Melissa wanted something. This understanding would shape every major decision and disappointment for the next 2 decades. The favoritism manifested in countless ways throughout their childhood. When both girls expressed interest in piano lessons, their parents enrolled only Melissa, explaining that lessons were expensive and they couldn't afford 2 students. Sarah taught herself to play, using library books and free online videos, practicing on the family's old keyboard when Melissa wasn't using it. When Sarah finally performed a complex piece she had learned independently, her parents barely looked up from praising Melissa's simple recital song. School achievements followed the same pattern. Sarah maintained perfect attendance and straight A's throughout elementary school, accomplishments that earned brief nods of acknowledgement. When Melissa brought home a B+ on a particularly challenging math test, the family celebrated with her favorite restaurant and a small gift. Sarah learned not to expect celebrations for her successes, but she noticed that Melissa's modest accomplishments always warranted family attention and rewards. The most painful example of this disparity occurred during Sarah's 8th grade science fair. She had spent months developing a project on water purification methods, conducting experiments, documenting results, and creating a professional presentation board. The project won 2nd place at the regional competition, earning her a small scholarship and recognition in the local newspaper. The day of her award ceremony happened to coincide with Melissa's 6th grade field day at elementary school. Without discussion or consultation, Carmen and Miguel chose to attend Melissa's field day rather than Sarah's award ceremony. Sarah sat in the auditorium, surrounded by other families celebrating their children's achievements, while her own parents cheered for Melissa's participation ribbon in a potato sack race across town. The award ceremony coordinator, noting Sarah's empty seats, offered to take photos so her family could see them later. Sarah accepted gracefully, already skilled at masking disappointment with mature understanding. High school intensified these patterns rather than resolving them. Sarah joined debate team, student government, and volunteer programs while maintaining her academic excellence. She earned leadership positions and college recommendations from teachers who recognized her dedication and natural ability. Meanwhile, Melissa struggled academically and socially, requiring constant parental intervention and support. During Sarah's junior year, she was selected for a prestigious summer program at Colorado State University, focused on environmental science. The program offered college credit, research experience, and networking opportunities that could significantly impact her university applications. The cost was substantial, but Sarah had been saving money from her part-time job at a local bookstore for over a year to help cover expenses. 3 weeks before the program began, Melissa announced she wanted to attend an expensive drama camp in California that same summer. Despite having shown no previous serious interest in theater, Melissa had decided this camp was essential for her personal development. The cost was nearly identical to Sarah's science program, and their parents' budget could only accommodate one summer opportunity. The family meeting that followed revealed everything Sarah needed to know about her parents' priorities. Carmen and Miguel presented the situation as an impossible choice between their daughter's dreams, but their decision-making process made clear which dreams mattered more. They emphasized Melissa's need for confidence building and social development, suggesting that Sarah's academic achievements proved she was already on a successful path and didn't need additional opportunities. "You're so independent and capable, Mija," Miguel explained to Sarah as she sat numbly at the kitchen table. "You'll find other ways to get ahead, but Melissa needs our help right now to find her passion." Sarah withdrew her application from the science program and watched her savings disappear into Melissa's drama camp fund. The camp lasted 3 weeks, after which Melissa declared theater wasn't really her thing after all. Sarah spent that summer working double shifts at the bookstore, calculating how many hours of minimum wage labor had funded her sister's brief theatrical exploration. The pattern continued through college applications and beyond. Sarah received multiple scholarship offers and chose a state university where she could study environmental engineering while working part-time to minimize family financial burden. Melissa attended a private liberal arts college 3 times more expensive, changing majors 4 times in 5 years while their parents covered tuition, housing, and spending money without question. During Sarah's sophomore year of college, she met David Chen in her advanced chemistry class.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
David was everything Sarah hadn't known she was looking for. Intellectually curious, emotionally mature, and genuinely interested in supporting her ambitions rather than competing with them. Their relationship developed slowly and thoughtfully, built on shared values and mutual respect rather than dramatic gestures and constant attention. David came from a family where achievement was expected but also celebrated, where siblings supported rather than competed with each other. He found the Ramirez family dynamics puzzling and concerning, especially after witnessing several family gatherings where Sarah's accomplishments were overshadowed by whatever crisis or celebration currently surrounded Melissa. "Your parents seem to take your success for granted," David observed after a particularly difficult family dinner where Sarah's internship at an environmental consulting firm was mentioned briefly while Melissa's new boyfriend received extensive discussion and approval. "They know I'm responsible," Sarah replied, using the familiar explanation that had comforted her throughout childhood. "Melissa needs more support right now." David frowned at this response. Everyone needs support sometimes. Even responsible people deserve recognition and celebration. His perspective challenged assumptions Sarah had carried her entire life. She began to notice patterns she had previously accepted as normal family dynamics. The way conversations always centered on Melissa's experiences. The way her parents immediately offered help when Melissa faced challenges, but expected Sarah to handle difficulties independently. The way family photos prominently featured Melissa while Sarah appeared in background or edge positions. By her senior year of college, Sarah had earned a prestigious internship with a Denver environmental firm and begun considering graduate school options. David, now her serious boyfriend of 3 years, supported her career ambitions and often discussed their future together in terms that included both their professional goals and personal dreams. The proposal came during spring break of their senior year. David had planned a hiking trip to Rocky Mountain National Park, choosing a secluded overlook where they had shared their first serious conversation about the future. The ring was a vintage piece from his grandmother's collection, a stunning sapphire surrounded by small diamonds that caught the mountain's sunlight perfectly. "Sarah, you're the most determined and caring person I've ever known," David said as he knelt on the rocky outcrop overlooking the valley below. I want to support your dreams and build new ones together. Will you marry me? Sarah's acceptance was immediate and joyful. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting decades for her finger. They spent the afternoon making plans and calling family members to share their excitement. David's family responded with immediate congratulations and requests for details about wedding plans and timeline. His parents offered to help with arrangements and expressed genuine enthusiasm about welcoming Sarah into their family. The warmth and inclusion she experienced during that phone call highlighted everything she had been missing in her own family relationships. When Sarah called her parents to share the engagement news, their initial response seemed positive. Carmen expressed happiness and asked appropriate questions about David and their plans. Miguel offered congratulations and mentioned looking forward to meeting David's parents. However, when Sarah returned home the following weekend to share the engagement in person and show off her ring, she discovered that family dynamics hadn't changed despite her major life milestone. The conversation about her engagement lasted approximately 15 minutes before shifting to Melissa's current drama, involving a complicated relationship with her coworker at the marketing firm where she had recently started working. Melissa had been dating someone from her office, which violated company policy and created professional complications. Instead of addressing the situation maturely by either ending the relationship or finding new employment, Melissa have created an elaborate story about workplace harassment to explain why her romantic relationship was causing problems. Carmen and Miguel spent the entire dinner discussing strategies for helping Melissa navigate this self-created crisis. Sarah's engagement ring, which should have been admired and celebrated, received only brief compliments before being forgotten in favor of analyzing Melissa's relationship drama. David, who had accompanied Sarah for this important family meeting, watched the evening's events with barely concealed amazement at how quickly the focus shifted away from their major announcement. Later that night, as they prepared to leave Phoenix and return to college, David expressed his concerns about the family dynamic he had witnessed. "I've never seen anything like that," he admitted as they packed their overnight bags. "You announced our engagement, and within minutes they were completely focused on Melissa's work problems. Don't they realize how important this moment is for you?" Sarah found herself making familiar excuses. "Melissa is going through a difficult time right now. She needs their support more than I do." "But this is your engagement," David insisted. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment that deserves celebration and attention. Your needs matter too." His words resonated with years of accumulated disappointment and overlooked achievements. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to feel genuinely hurt by her parents' response rather than immediately rationalizing their behavior. The drive back to Colorado was quiet as she processed these complicated emotions. The hurt deepened over the following weeks as family communications continued to focus on Melissa's workplace situation rather than wedding planning or engagement celebration. When Sarah called with updates about their graduation plans or job interviews, Carmen would offer brief responses before transitioning to detailed discussions about Melissa's latest relationship complications. Meanwhile, David's family embraced Sarah completely, treating her as a daughter rather than an in-law and expressing genuine interest in her career goals and wedding preferences. The contrast between the two family approaches became increasingly stark as graduation approached. Sarah's college graduation ceremony fell on the same weekend as a family barbecue Melissa had planned to introduce her problematic coworker boyfriend to extended relatives. Despite the graduation being scheduled months in advance and representing the culmination of 4 years of academic excellence, Carmen and Miguel chose to attend Melissa's barbecue instead. "Mija, you understand how important this is for Melissa. She really needs family support right now, and you're so capable of handling things on your own." Sarah sat in the graduation auditorium surrounded by David's family, who had driven from California to celebrate her achievement. His parents cheered loudly when her name was called, took dozens of photos, and treated her accomplishment as a significant family milestone. Later at the celebration dinner, David's mother gave a speech about how proud they were to welcome such an accomplished young woman into their family. The absence of her own parents at such a significant moment crystallized something fundamental for Sarah. The drive back to Colorado was quiet as she processed these complicated emotions. The hurt deepened over the following weeks as family communications continued to focus on Melissa's workplace situation rather than wedding planning or engagement celebration. When Sarah called with updates about their graduation plans or job interviews, Carmen would offer brief responses before transitioning to detailed discussions about Melissa's latest relationship complications. Meanwhile, David's family embraced Sarah completely, treating her as a daughter rather than an in-law and expressing genuine interest in her career goals and wedding preferences. The contrast between the two family approaches became increasingly stark as graduation approached. Sarah's college graduation ceremony fell on the same weekend as a family barbecue Melissa had planned to introduce her problematic coworker boyfriend to extended relatives. Despite the graduation being scheduled months in advance and representing the culmination of 4 years of academic excellence, Carmen and Miguel chose to attend Melissa's barbecue instead. Mija, you understand how important this is for Melissa. She really needs family support right now, and you're so capable of handling things on your own. Sarah sat in the graduation auditorium surrounded by David's family, who had driven from California to celebrate her achievement. His parents cheered loudly when her name was called, took dozens of photos, and treated her accomplishment as a significant family milestone. Later, at the celebration dinner, David's mother gave a speech about how proud they were to welcome such an accomplished young woman into their family. The absence of her own parents at such a significant moment crystallized something fundamental for Sarah. She realized that expecting her family to prioritize her achievements or milestones was an exercise in futility. They had established patterns decades earlier, and those patterns weren't changing simply because she had reached adulthood or achieved independence. That realization proved prophetic when Sarah and David began planning their wedding in earnest. Every conversation about wedding details with her parents somehow became a discussion about Melissa's needs or preferences. When Sarah mentioned potential dates, Carmen worried about Melissa's work schedule. When Sarah described venue options, Miguel suggested locations that would be more convenient for Melissa's travel arrangements. The engagement ring itself became a source of family tension in unexpected ways. During family gatherings, relatives would admire the vintage piece and ask about its history. David would proudly explain that it had belonged to his grandmother, sharing stories about its significance in his family's history. These conversations seemed to highlight for Carmen that Sarah was joining another family tradition rather than continuing Ramirez family customs. "It's beautiful, mija," Carmen said during one visit, examining the ring with what seemed like forced enthusiasm. "Though it's a shame we don't have family rings to pass down. Your grandmother Rosa's jewelry went to your Aunt Maria's daughters." The comment stung because Sarah remembered Rosa's jewelry collection clearly, including several beautiful rings that had been distributed to other relatives while Sarah was considered too young to appreciate such pieces. The fact that family heirlooms had been given to cousins rather than immediate granddaughters reflected the same pattern of oversight that had characterized Sarah's entire childhood. As wedding planning progressed, Sarah found herself increasingly grateful for David's family's consistent support and involvement. They treated wedding preparations as exciting family events, offering help without criticism and expressing enthusiasm for all the details that seemed to bore or stress her own parents. The engagement period, which should have been one of the happiest times in Sarah's life, was overshadowed by the growing realization that her family's attention would never focus on her achievements or milestones in the way she had always hoped. Even her engagement, a universally celebrated life event, couldn't compete with Melissa's ongoing drama for parental attention and concern. This dynamic reached its peak during the engagement party David's family organized in Denver. Carmen and Miguel attended, but spent most of the evening discussing Melissa's job situation with anyone who would listen. When other guests asked about Sarah's accomplishments or wedding plans, her parents provided brief, polite responses before redirecting conversations to their concerns about Melissa's career development. Sarah watched David's family navigate the evening with grace, making genuine efforts to engage with her parents while clearly noting the lack of reciprocal interest in celebrating Sarah's engagement. The contrast between family approaches was impossible to ignore, and Sarah found herself apologizing to David's relatives for her parents' distracted behavior. Later that evening, as she cleaned up after the party, Sarah caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The engagement ring caught the light beautifully, and for a moment she felt purely happy about her future with David. But underlying that happiness was a growing certainty that her wedding day would likely follow familiar patterns, with her joy competing for attention with whatever crisis or need currently surrounded Melissa. She had no way of knowing that her pessimistic prediction would prove dramatically accurate, or that the beautiful ring on her finger would become the center of the most devastating betrayal her family could inflict. The foundation of favoritism that had shaped her entire childhood was about to create consequences that would change everything she thought she knew about family loyalty and love. The theft happened on what should have been the most perfect morning of Sarah's life. 3 months before her wedding to David, she woke up in her childhood bedroom in Phoenix, surrounded by boxes of wedding decorations and favor supplies that Carmen had insisted on storing in Sarah's old room. The engagement ring sat on her nightstand where she placed it each night, catching the early morning Arizona sun streaming through familiar windows. Sarah had returned home for her final dress fitting and to finalize wedding details with vendors her parents had recommended. Despite their general lack of enthusiasm for wedding planning, Carmen and Miguel had suddenly become invested in certain aspects of the celebration, particularly the guest list and reception venue. Sarah suspected their newfound interest stemmed from wanting to present the right image to extended family and friends rather than genuine excitement about her marriage. The morning routine felt comfortably familiar as Sarah prepared for her dress appointment. She showered, applied minimal makeup, and reached for her engagement ring to complete her outfit. The nightstand was empty. Thinking she might have placed it in her jewelry box out of habit, Sarah searched through the small collection of earrings and necklaces she kept in Phoenix. Nothing. A thorough search of the bedroom revealed no trace of the ring. Sarah checked bathroom counters, dresser surfaces, and even the pockets of clothes she had worn the previous day. Growing panic replaced mild concern as she expanded her search to the entire house, checking kitchen counters, living room tables, and anywhere she might have absent-mindedly set down the precious piece. "Mama, have you seen my engagement ring anywhere?" Sarah asked Carmen, who was preparing breakfast in the kitchen with unusual cheerfulness. Carmen's response seemed oddly delayed, as if she needed a moment to process the question. "Your ring? No, mija, I haven't seen it. Are you sure you brought it home from Denver?" The question struck Sarah as strange since Carmen had seen and commented on the ring multiple times during Sarah's visit. "I've been wearing it every day since I got here. I took it off last night and put it on my nightstand like always." "Well, it must be somewhere," Carmen replied with a casual shrug that seemed inappropriate given the gravity of losing an irreplaceable family heirloom. Things don't just disappear. Sarah continued searching throughout the morning, becoming increasingly frantic as her dress appointment approached. She called David to explain the situation, and his immediate concern and offer to fly to Phoenix highlighted how seriously he took the loss compared to her family's casual response. "Could it have fallen behind furniture or mold under something?" David suggested, his voice tight with worry. "That ring has been in my family for 60 years. My grandmother would be devastated if something happened to it." The weight of potentially losing such a significant family piece added guilt to Sarah's panic. She recruited Melissa to help search, hoping fresh eyes might spot something she had missed. Her sister's assistance felt half-hearted, and several times Sarah caught Melissa checking her phone instead of actually looking for the ring. "Maybe you should call the police," Melissa suggested after an hour of desultory searching.
If someone broke in and stole it, there might be other missing items too. The idea of theft hadn't occurred to Sarah, but a careful inventory of her belongings revealed nothing else missing. Her laptop, jewelry, and cash remained exactly where she had left them. Only the engagement ring had disappeared, and only from her secure bedroom in her parents' house. The dress fitting proceeded under a cloud of anxiety as Sarah tried on her wedding gown while constantly twisting the naked ring finger on her left hand. The seamstress noticed her distraction and asked about finalizing accessories, mentioning that the vintage ring she had worn during previous fittings complemented the dress's classic style perfectly. "I'm having some issues with the ring right now," Sarah explained vaguely, not wanting to elaborate on the mysterious disappearance to someone outside the family. That evening, Sarah called David again to report that the ring remained missing, despite extensive searching and retracing of all her steps since arriving in Phoenix. The conversation was difficult, with David struggling to understand how an irreplaceable family heirloom could simply vanish from a secure bedroom. "I'm going to extend my trip and keep looking," Sarah promised. "Maybe it rolled somewhere unexpected, or maybe I put it somewhere safe and forgot." David's parents called later that evening to express their concern and support. The conversation highlighted the difference between his family's response to the crisis and her own family's casual attitude. David's mother offered to fly to Phoenix to help search, while his father suggested contacting insurance companies and filing police reports. "These things happen, dear," David's mother said gently. "The important thing is that you and David are getting married. The ring is precious to us, but you're what matters most." The kindness and understanding in her voice brought tears to Sarah's eyes, especially when contrasted with her own mother's dismissive response to the situation. Carmen seemed more annoyed by the extended search disrupting household routines than concerned about the loss of Sarah's engagement ring. 3 days of intensive searching yielded no results. Sarah examined every inch of her childhood bedroom, moved furniture, checked air vents, and even searched through vacuum cleaner bags in case the ring had somehow been accidentally cleaned up. She retraced every step of her Phoenix visit, returning to restaurants, shops, and the dress-fitting location to ask about lost jewelry. The wedding was now less than 3 months away, and Sarah faced the devastating prospect of walking down the aisle without her engagement ring. David suggested they could purchase a temporary replacement, but Sarah couldn't bear the thought of wearing a substitute for such a meaningful piece of family history. During her extended Phoenix stay, Sarah noticed subtle changes in family dynamics that she couldn't quite identify. Melissa seemed unusually happy and energetic, spending more time getting ready for work and coming home with shopping bags from expensive stores. When Sarah commented on her sister's apparent financial comfort, Melissa explained that she had received a promotion and significant raise at the marketing firm. Carmen and Miguel also seemed oddly cheerful, despite their daughter's obvious distress about the missing ring. Their casual attitude towards such a significant loss began to feel less like emotional support and more like deliberate indifference. Sarah started to wonder if they truly understood the ring's importance to David's family and to her personally. The breakthrough came accidentally on Sarah's final day in Phoenix. She was packing her belongings, preparing to return to Denver empty-handed and heartbroken, when she decided to do one last search of the house. While checking behind Melissa's bedroom door for any possibility the ring had somehow migrated to other rooms, Sarah noticed an unfamiliar jewelry box on her sister's dresser. The box was new, made of polished wood with silver hardware that looked expensive and recently purchased. Sarah had seen every piece of jewelry Melissa owned throughout their shared childhood and adolescence, and this box represented a significant upgrade from the small plastic organizers Melissa had always used. Curiosity overcame respect for privacy as Sarah opened the box to examine its contents. Inside, nestled among several new pieces of obviously expensive jewelry, sat her engagement ring. The distinctive sapphire caught the afternoon light exactly as it had that morning 3 months ago when David had proposed in Rocky Mountain National Park. The shock of discovery momentarily paralyzed Sarah's ability to process what she was seeing. Her engagement ring, the irreplaceable family heirloom she had been frantically searching for during 3 days of panic and guilt, sat casually among her sister's collection, as if it belonged there. The betrayal was so profound and unexpected that Sarah initially wondered if she was somehow mistaken about the ring's identity. But there was no mistake. The vintage setting, the specific arrangement of small diamonds around the central sapphire, the slight wear pattern on the band that David's grandmother had created through decades of wearing it, every detail confirmed that this was definitely her engagement ring. Melissa had taken it from Sarah's nightstand and added it to her own jewelry collection without any apparent concern for the devastation its disappearance had caused. Sarah photographed the ring in Melissa's jewelry box before carefully removing it and placing it back on her finger, where it belonged. The familiar weight and perfect fit provided physical confirmation of what her eyes had already established. This was absolutely her ring, stolen by her own sister and hidden among newly acquired expensive jewelry that Melissa supposedly could afford due to a workplace promotion. The implications of the theft extended far beyond the simple act of taking jewelry. Melissa had watched Sarah search frantically for days, had listened to phone conversations where Sarah expressed guilt and panic about losing David's family heirloom, had witnessed the stress and heartbreak the disappearance had caused, and had never once suggested looking in her own bedroom or admitted to any knowledge about the ring's whereabouts. More disturbing was the realization that Melissa's recent shopping sprees and expensive lifestyle upgrades had likely been funded by selling other jewelry, possibly pieces she had stolen from family members or friends. The new jewelry box contained several pieces that seemed far beyond Melissa's normal financial reach, suggesting a pattern of theft rather than an isolated incident involving Sarah's ring. Sarah's immediate impulse was to confront Melissa directly, but years of family dynamics made her hesitate. Every previous conflict between the sisters had resulted in Sarah being painted as the unreasonable aggressor, while Melissa received sympathy and support for being attacked by her older sister. Carmen and Miguel's consistent pattern of protecting Melissa from consequences meant that even catching her red-handed with stolen property might not result in appropriate accountability. Instead, Sarah decided to document everything carefully before taking any action. She photographed the entire contents of Melissa's jewelry box, focusing on pieces that appeared expensive and new. She took detailed images of the ring itself, showing its distinctive features and proving its presence in Melissa's collection. Most importantly, she photographed text messages from David expressing concern about the missing family heirloom, establishing a timeline that the ring had been missing for days while sitting in Melissa's bedroom. The evidence compilation process gave Sarah time to process the emotional impact of discovering the theft. This wasn't a case of finding lost jewelry or resolving a misunderstanding. This was deliberate theft of an irreplaceable item that Melissa knew held enormous sentimental and financial value. The cruelty of watching Sarah suffer while hiding the stolen ring represented a level of betrayal that fundamentally changed how Sarah viewed her sister and their relationship. That evening, Sarah returned to Denver with her engagement ring restored, but her family relationships permanently altered. She didn't confront Melissa before leaving Phoenix, choosing instead to process the situation with David and decide how to handle such a profound breach of trust.
David's reaction to learning about the theft was immediate and intense anger, followed by relief that the ring had been recovered safely. His parents shared his outrage when informed about Melissa's actions, and David's father suggested involving law enforcement given the ring's significant value and the deliberate nature of the theft. "She stole a family heirloom and let you suffer for days thinking you had lost it," David said after reviewing the photographic evidence. "That's not family drama, Sarah. That's criminal behavior." The legal perspective forced Sarah to confront the seriousness of what Melissa had done. The ring's appraised value exceeded the threshold for felony theft in Arizona, meaning Melissa could face significant criminal charges if Sarah chose to pursue legal action. The thought of sending her own sister to jail felt impossible, despite the magnitude of the betrayal. However, Sarah also realized that allowing the theft to go unaddressed would likely ensure similar behavior in the future. Melissa had faced no consequences for a lifetime of entitled behavior and boundary violations, and the engagement ring incident represented an escalation that demanded response. The decision about how to handle the situation became more complicated when Carmen called Sarah the day after her return to Denver. Instead of asking whether the ring had been found, Carmen immediately began discussing wedding details, as if the previous week of frantic searching had never occurred. "Mija, I've been thinking about the seating arrangements for the reception," Carmen said, launching into detailed concerns about which relatives should sit together. "Your Aunt Rosa wants to bring her new boyfriend, but your Uncle Marco still has feelings about the divorce." The casual transition from missing engagement ring to reception planning felt surreal and inappropriate. Sarah interrupted her mother's monologue to address the obvious elephant in the conversation. "Mama, I found my engagement ring. It was in Melissa's jewelry box along with a lot of other expensive pieces I've never seen before." The silence that followed this statement lasted long enough for Sarah to wonder if the phone connection had been lost. When Carmen finally responded, her voice carried a defensive tone that immediately revealed her awareness of Melissa's theft. "Are you sure it was your ring? Maybe Melissa has something similar that you mistook for yours." The absurdity of the suggestion confirmed Carmen's complicity in concealing the theft. No one could mistake the distinctive vintage piece for any other ring, and Carmen had seen and admired it enough times to recognize it immediately. Her attempt to create doubt about the ring's identity proved she knew exactly what Melissa had done. "It's definitely my ring, Mama. David's grandmother's ring with the sapphire and diamond setting that you complimented multiple times. It was sitting in Melissa's jewelry box along with several other expensive pieces that she apparently can't afford on her salary." Another long silence preceded Carmen's next response, which revealed the full extent of her willingness to protect Melissa from consequences. Well, maybe there's been some misunderstanding. You know how Melissa is about borrowing things. She probably just wanted to see how it looked and forgot to put it back. The rationalization was so inadequate that Sarah felt insulted by its presentation. Taking jewelry from someone's bedroom while they sleep, hiding it for days while the owner searches frantically, and lying repeatedly about its whereabouts could not be explained as borrowing with permission. "She stole my engagement ring, Mama. She watched me cry about losing David's family heirloom for 3 days and never mentioned that she had taken it. That's not borrowing, that's theft." Carmen's response revealed the depths of her denial and favoritism. Rather than acknowledging the seriousness of Melissa's actions or expressing appropriate concern about the theft, she immediately shifted into protective mode. "Don't use such harsh words about your sister. Melissa has been under a lot of pressure at work lately. She's not thinking clearly about some things. I'm sure she didn't mean any harm." The conversation continued, with Carmen making increasingly desperate excuses for Melissa's behavior while refusing to acknowledge the betrayal Sarah had experienced. When Sarah mentioned the other expensive jewelry in Melissa's collection, Carmen suggested that Melissa's promotion had provided extra income for shopping, ignoring the obvious financial impossibility of such purchases on Melissa's known salary. The phone call ended with Carmen promising to speak with Melissa about being more careful with other people's belongings, as if the theft had been a minor etiquette violation rather than a serious crime. Sarah realized that expecting accountability or appropriate response from her parents was futile, and that any consequences for Melissa's behavior would need to come from other sources. Over the following weeks, Sarah struggled with decisions about how to address the theft while planning her wedding. David's family continued to express outrage about Melissa's actions and suggested limiting her access to their home and belongings during wedding events. David himself had lost all patience with Sarah's family dynamics and encouraged her to consider reducing contact with people who treated her so poorly. The situation became more complicated when Sarah discovered that the theft had been part of a larger pattern of financial misconduct. Through careful questioning of mutual acquaintances, she learned that Melissa had been selling jewelry and electronics that she claimed to own, but that had actually belonged to friends who had trusted her with temporary custody. Jessica Torres, a college friend who had remained close to Melissa, contacted Sarah after hearing about the engagement ring incident through mutual connections. Jessica revealed that several valuable items had gone missing from her apartment after Melissa had house-sat during a business trip. The items included jewelry, a laptop, and cash that Jessica had kept in a bedroom safe that only Melissa could have accessed. "I never wanted to accuse her directly because we've been friends for so long," Jessica explained during a difficult phone conversation. "But now that I know about your ring, I realize Melissa has probably been stealing from people for months or even years." Similar stories emerged from other friends and acquaintances who had experienced mysterious disappearances of valuable items after spending time with Melissa. The pattern suggested systematic theft rather than impulsive decisions, indicating that Melissa had been funding her lifestyle through deliberate criminal activity while maintaining her public image as a struggling young professional deserving family support. The revelation that her sister was likely a serial thief forced Sarah to reconsider her entire understanding of Melissa's character and motivations. The engagement ring theft hadn't been an isolated incident of poor judgment, but rather part of an ongoing criminal enterprise that victimized people who trusted Melissa with access to their homes and belongings. Sarah's wedding planning proceeded under this cloud of family betrayal and criminal revelation. She made the difficult decision to exclude Melissa from meaningful wedding responsibilities, despite Carmen's protests about maintaining family unity. David himself had lost all patience with Sarah's family dynamics and encouraged her to consider reducing contact with people who treated her so poorly. The situation became more complicated when Sarah discovered that the theft had been part of a larger pattern of financial misconduct. Through careful questioning of mutual acquaintances, she learned that Melissa had been selling jewelry and electronics that she claimed to own, but that had actually belonged to friends who had trusted her with temporary custody. Jessica Torres, a college friend who had remained close to Melissa, contacted Sarah after hearing about the engagement ring incident through mutual connections. Jessica revealed that several valuable items had gone missing from her apartment after Melissa had house-sat during a business trip. The items included jewelry, a laptop, and cash that Jessica had kept in a bedroom safe that only Melissa could have accessed.
"I never wanted to accuse her directly because we've been friends for so long," Jessica explained during a difficult phone conversation. "But now that I know about your ring, I realize Melissa has probably been stealing from people for months or even years." Similar stories emerged from other friends and acquaintances who had experienced mysterious disappearances of valuable items after spending time with Melissa. The pattern suggested systematic theft rather than impulsive decisions, indicating that Melissa had been funding her lifestyle through deliberate criminal activity while maintaining her public image as a struggling young professional deserving family support. The revelation that her sister was likely a serial thief forced Sarah to reconsider her entire understanding of Melissa's character and motivations. The engagement ring theft hadn't been an isolated incident of poor judgment, but rather part of an ongoing criminal enterprise that victimized people who trusted Melissa with access to their homes and belongings. Sarah's wedding planning proceeded under this cloud of family betrayal and criminal revelation. She made the difficult decision to exclude Melissa from meaningful wedding responsibilities, despite Carmen's protests about maintaining family unity.
The maid of honor role went to David's sister Jennifer, who had shown more genuine support for Sarah's marriage than her own family had provided. The decision to limit Melissa's wedding involvement created significant family tension, with Carmen and Miguel pressuring Sarah to reconsider in the interest of family harmony. They continued to minimize the seriousness of the theft, describing it as a sisterly misunderstanding rather than criminal behavior. "She's still your sister, mija," Miguel argued during a tense phone conversation about wedding party assignments. "Family is forever. You'll regret excluding her from such an important day." Sarah's response reflected her growing understanding that family relationships required mutual respect and appropriate behavior, rather than unconditional acceptance of harmful actions. "She stole my engagement ring and lied about it for days while watching me suffer. That's not sisterly behavior, that's criminal behavior. I won't reward theft by giving her special privileges at my wedding." The conversation ended with Miguel expressing disappointment in Sarah's hardened attitude toward family, apparently missing the irony that his disappointment focused on the victim's response rather than the perpetrator's actions. The pattern of holding Sarah to higher standards while excusing Melissa's misconduct continued even in the face of clear evidence of criminal behavior. As the wedding approached, Sarah found herself planning what should have been a joyous celebration while managing the emotional aftermath of profound family betrayal. The engagement ring had been recovered, but the trust and innocence lost through its theft could never be restored. Her relationship with Melissa was fundamentally changed, built now on wariness rather than familial affection. The most painful realization was that her parents' response to the theft had been entirely predictable based on decades of favoritism and excuse-making. Even criminal behavior directed at their other daughter couldn't overcome their compulsive need to protect Melissa from consequences. Sarah understood that expecting genuine responses from people who had shown her their priorities consistently for nearly 3 decades was an exercise in futility. 3 weeks before the wedding, Melissa made her first direct contact with Sarah since the theft had been discovered. The phone call came late at night, with Melissa's voice showing signs of tears and distress that once would have immediately activated Sarah's protective instincts. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about what happened with your ring. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but I need you to understand that I never meant for things to get so complicated." The conversation that followed revealed Melissa's complete inability to take appropriate responsibility for her actions. She described the theft as a momentary lapse in judgment, claiming she had only wanted to try on the ring and then had forgotten to return it. When Sarah pointed out that she had searched for days while Melissa watched her suffer, Melissa claimed she had been too embarrassed to admit her mistake. "I was going to put it back before you noticed it was gone, but then you started searching and I panicked. I didn't know how to explain without making you even angrier." The explanation was so inadequate and dishonest that Sarah felt insulted by its presentation. Taking jewelry without permission, hiding it for days, and lying repeatedly about its whereabouts could not be rationalized as momentary poor judgment or embarrassment management.
You committed theft, Melissa. You stole a family heirloom worth thousands of dollars and let me think I had lost it. That's not embarrassment or poor judgment. That's criminal behavior. Melissa's response revealed the extent of her entitlement and inability to accept accountability. Rather than acknowledging the seriousness of her actions, she became defensive and accusatory. Why are you being so dramatic about this? I gave it back, didn't I? It's not like I sold it or damaged it. You're acting like I committed some major crime when all I did was borrow something without asking. The casual minimization of theft as unauthorized borrowing demonstrated Melissa's fundamental inability to understand appropriate boundaries or accept responsibility for harmful behavior. Sarah realized that expecting genuine accountability or remorse was pointless when dealing with someone who couldn't even acknowledge the basic wrongness of their actions. The conversation ended with Melissa demanding to know whether Sarah planned to file criminal charges or involve law enforcement. The question revealed her awareness that her actions could have serious legal consequences, despite her attempts to minimize their significance. I haven't decided what I'm going to do about legal action, Sarah replied honestly, but I have decided that I can't trust you and I won't put myself in positions where you can victimize me again. Melissa's final response encapsulated everything wrong with their family dynamics and her own character. Rather than accepting responsibility or expressing genuine remorse, she immediately shifted to emotional manipulation and victim blaming. I can't believe my own sister would threaten me with jail over a misunderstanding. After everything our family has done for you, this is how you repay us? By destroying relationships over a piece of jewelry? The audacity of characterizing herself as the victim while demanding gratitude for unspecified family support perfectly illustrated why Sarah's attempts to maintain normal sibling relationships had been unsuccessful. Melissa existed in a reality where her needs and desires took precedence over everyone else's rights and boundaries, and where any resistance to her entitlement was treated as unreasonable aggression. Sarah's wedding took place on a beautiful October day in Denver, surrounded by people who genuinely celebrated her happiness and supported her marriage. David's family embraced her completely, treating her as a beloved daughter and sister rather than an obligation to be managed. Her professional colleagues attended with enthusiasm, and close friends from college created a joyful atmosphere of celebration. Carmen and Miguel attended the ceremony, but maintained emotional distance that was obvious to other wedding guests. They performed their parental duties mechanically without displaying genuine happiness or pride in their daughter's achievement. Their behavior contrasted sharply with David's parents, who openly expressed joy and excitement about the marriage. Melissa attended as a regular guest rather than in any special capacity, wearing an outfit that seemed calculated to draw attention away from the bride. Her jewelry collection was notably elaborate and expensive, confirming Sarah's suspicions about ongoing theft funding her lifestyle. During the reception, several guests commented on Melissa's obvious displays of wealth and asked Sarah privately about her sister's financial situation. The wedding ring ceremony held special significance for Sarah beyond its symbolic meaning for the marriage. As David placed the wedding band beside her recovered engagement ring, she felt a sense of completion and security that had been missing since the theft.
The rings together represented not just her commitment to David, but also her successful recovery from family betrayal and her determination to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The reception proceeded beautifully despite her family's lukewarm participation. David's family made speeches celebrating Sarah's accomplishments and expressing their joy about welcoming her into their family. Her own parents offered brief, generic comments that could have applied to any wedding rather than reflecting personal knowledge or pride in their daughter's achievements. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Sarah realized that her wedding day had been exactly what she had hoped for, despite her family's inability to provide appropriate support. The people who mattered most had celebrated meaningfully, and the absence of genuine family enthusiasm hadn't diminished the joy of the occasion. However, the day also marked the final confirmation that her relationship with her birth family would never meet her needs for emotional support, celebration, or basic respect. The engagement ring theft had been a watershed moment that revealed the true nature of relationships she had spent decades trying to improve through patience, understanding, and compromise. Standing in her wedding dress, surrounded by people who had chosen to love and support her rather than merely tolerating her existence, Sarah understood that family could be created through intention and mutual care rather than simply inherited through blood relationships. The realization was both liberating and heartbreaking, representing the end of childhood hopes for family acceptance alongside the beginning of adult relationships built on healthier foundations. 3 years after her wedding, Sarah received a call that would provide the perfect opportunity for long-awaited justice. The number on her phone displayed Melissa's contact information, which Sarah had kept despite minimal communication since the engagement ring theft. The voice on the other end was barely recognizable through tears and hysteria. "Sarah, I need help. Everything is falling apart. Marcus is divorcing me and he's trying to take everything. I don't know what to do." Marcus Williams had been Melissa's husband for less than 2 years, a successful Denver attorney she had met through her work at the marketing firm. Their whirlwind romance and expensive wedding had been funded primarily by Marcus's established career, while Melissa contributed elaborate plans and expensive tastes that exceeded her actual financial capacity. Sarah listened to her sister's breakdown with detached interest rather than the automatic sympathy that would have characterized her response in previous years. The engagement ring theft had fundamentally altered her emotional relationship with Melissa's problems, creating boundaries that protected Sarah from manipulation while allowing her to observe family dynamics with clinical objectivity. "What happened with the marriage?" Sarah asked, genuine curiosity motivating the question rather than emotional investment in the outcome. Melissa's explanation emerged between sobs and accusations against Marcus, painting a picture of a relationship that had deteriorated rapidly once the honeymoon period ended and real-world financial responsibilities began. According to Melissa's version of events, Marcus had become controlling and unreasonable about money, questioning her spending habits and demanding accountability for household expenses. "He monitors every penny I spend," Melissa complained, apparently unaware of the irony given her history of theft and financial dishonesty. "He wants receipts for everything and gets angry when I buy clothes or get my hair done. It's like he thinks I'm stealing from him or something." The unconscious revelation in that final statement suggested that Marcus had likely discovered Melissa's pattern of financial misconduct, possibly including theft from their shared accounts or his personal property. Sarah suspected that Melissa's complaint about being treated like a thief was actually accurate self-assessment disguised as victimization. "Did something specific trigger the divorce proceedings?" Sarah pressed, interested in understanding what had finally convinced Marcus to end the marriage. Melissa's response confirmed Sarah's suspicions about the underlying issues. Marcus had discovered significant financial discrepancies in their joint accounts, including charges on credit cards he had never authorized and missing items from his home office that Melissa couldn't adequately explain. When confronted about these irregularities, Melissa had apparently become defensive and accusatory rather than providing honest explanations. "He went through our financial records like some kind of detective," Melissa said indignantly. "Marriage is supposed to be about trust, not investigation and suspicion. When I tried to explain that some expenses were necessary for my professional image, he accused me of lying and stealing." Sarah noted that Melissa's description focused entirely on Marcus's discovery methods rather than addressing the actual financial misconduct he had uncovered. The pattern was familiar from childhood, when Melissa would deflect accountability by criticizing the process through which her misbehavior was revealed rather than acknowledging the misbehavior itself. "What kind of evidence does he have about financial problems?" Sarah asked, already anticipating that Marcus's legal background had equipped him to document Melissa's misconduct thoroughly. The answer revealed the extent of Melissa's legal vulnerability. Marcus had compiled comprehensive records showing unauthorized credit card charges, missing valuables from his collection, and financial transactions that Melissa couldn't satisfactorily explain. His attorney background had made him particularly skilled at gathering evidence and understanding the legal implications of financial fraud within marriage. "He has spreadsheets and photos and bank statements," Melissa said, her voice rising with panic. "He's treating our marriage like a criminal case instead of trying to work things out. His divorce lawyer is making it sound like I committed crimes or something."
The reality was almost certainly that Melissa had committed crimes, and Marcus's legal training had enabled him to recognize and document criminal behavior that other victims might have missed or minimized. Sarah felt a mixture of satisfaction and vindication, knowing that someone with appropriate expertise had finally held Melissa accountable for her actions. "Where are you living now?" Sarah asked, noting that Melissa seemed to be calling from an unfamiliar environment based on background noise. Melissa's housing situation revealed the complete collapse of her carefully constructed lifestyle. Marcus had changed the locks on their shared home and obtained a restraining order preventing her from accessing joint property without legal supervision. She was currently staying in a cheap motel, having discovered that most of her friends were either unavailable or unwilling to provide temporary housing given her reputation for boundary violations and theft. "Nobody wants to help me," Melissa complained bitterly. "People I've known for years are suddenly too busy or don't have space. It's like everyone believes Marcus's version of things without even listening to my side." Sarah suspected that Melissa's isolation resulted from her own behavior rather than Marcus's influence. The pattern of theft and financial misconduct that had surfaced in her marriage had likely been preceded by similar incidents with friends and acquaintances who are now protecting themselves by maintaining distance. "Have you talked to Mom and Dad about temporary housing?" Sarah asked, curious about whether their parents were still willing to enable Melissa's behavior despite its escalation into criminal territory. Carmen and Miguel's response had been their predictable combination of emotional support and practical limitations. They expressed sympathy for Melissa's situation while explaining that their financial problems made it impossible to provide significant assistance.
Their Phoenix home could accommodate a short visit, but they couldn't support an adult daughter long-term, especially one whose legal troubles might impact their own financial security. "They say they love me and want to help, but they're worried about legal complications if Marcus tries to recover money or property through them," Melissa explained, with obvious hurt and confusion. "It's like they think I actually did something wrong instead of just being married to a controlling man." The shift in their parents' response represented a significant change from decades of unconditional support, regardless of Melissa's behavior. Sarah wondered whether financial limitations had finally forced Carmen and Miguel to acknowledge that their enabling approach was unsustainable, or whether the serious legal implications of Melissa's misconduct had overcome their compulsive need to protect her. "What do you want from me?" Sarah asked directly, recognizing that this phone call was ultimately a request for assistance rather than simple emotional support. Melissa's answer confirmed Sarah's suspicion while revealing the depth of her desperation and continued entitlement. Despite years of minimal contact and the unresolved engagement ring theft, Melissa expected Sarah to provide both emotional support and practical assistance during her crisis. "I need somewhere to stay while I figure out my legal situation, just temporarily, until I can get back on my feet and find my own place. I know we've had our differences, but you're my sister. Family has to help each other when things get serious." The appeal to family loyalty while simultaneously minimizing the engagement ring theft as mere differences demonstrated Melissa's continued inability to acknowledge the severity of her past behavior or understand why her relationship with Sarah had fundamentally changed. "Our differences include you stealing my engagement ring and lying about it for days while watching me suffer," Sarah replied calmly. "That's not a minor disagreement between sisters. That's criminal behavior that destroyed my trust in you." Melissa's response to this direct confrontation revealed her complete lack of genuine remorse or accountability, even 3 years after the incident. Rather than acknowledging the harm she had caused or expressing appropriate regret, she immediately became defensive and accusatory. "I can't believe you're still holding that against me. I was going through a difficult time and I made a mistake, but I gave it back, didn't I? It's not like you were permanently harmed or anything. Now I'm facing real problems and you're worried about something that happened years ago." The casual dismissal of theft as a mistake while demanding immediate forgiveness and support perfectly encapsulated everything problematic about Melissa's character and their family dynamics. Sarah realized that 3 years of separation and consequences had taught Melissa nothing about appropriate behavior or genuine accountability. Stealing is not a mistake, Melissa, it's a choice. And watching someone suffer while hiding what you stole is cruelty, not confusion.
The fact that you still don't understand why that behavior was wrong tells me that nothing has really changed about how you treat people. The conversation continued with Melissa alternating between emotional manipulation, victim playing, and anger as Sarah maintained firm boundaries about providing assistance. Eventually, Melissa hung up in frustration when it became clear that Sarah would not offer housing, money, or legal support for her current crisis. 2 days later, Carmen called Sarah with a more detailed account of Melissa's situation and a clear request for financial assistance that their parents couldn't provide. The conversation revealed that Marcus's divorce proceedings were more comprehensive and damaging than Melissa had initially described. The lawyer says Marcus is claiming that Melissa stole jewelry and electronics worth tens of thousands of dollars, Carmen explained, her voice heavy with worry and confusion. He has photographs and receipts and witness statements from people who say she took things from their homes, too. The revelation that Marcus had connected Melissa's marital theft to a broader pattern of stealing from multiple victims suggested that her criminal behavior had been even more extensive than Sarah had realized. Marcus's legal background had apparently enabled him to conduct a thorough investigation that revealed the full scope of Melissa's misconduct. He's trying to get criminal charges filed in addition to the divorce, Carmen continued. The prosecutor is reviewing evidence about theft, fraud, and something called conversion of marital assets. Melissa could go to jail if they decide to press charges. Sarah felt a complex mixture of emotions listening to her mother describe the serious legal consequences finally catching up with Melissa's years of criminal behavior. There was satisfaction in knowing that appropriate accountability was occurring, but also sadness about the family destruction that Melissa's choices had created. "What kind of evidence does Marcus have?" Sarah asked, curious about the thoroughness of the case being built against her sister. Carmen's answer revealed that Marcus had approached the situation with the methodical precision of a skilled attorney building a criminal case. He had documented missing items with photographs, purchase receipts, and insurance appraisals. He had interviewed friends and acquaintances who had experienced thefts after spending time with Melissa. Most damaging, he had discovered that Melissa had been selling stolen items through online marketplaces and had bank records showing deposits that corresponded to these illegal transactions. He even has video from one of those selling websites showing Melissa describing jewelry that belonged to his grandmother as if it was her own family heirloom, Carmen said with obvious distress. The police detective says that's evidence of organized criminal activity, not just marital problems. The professional nature of Melissa's theft operation went far beyond the impulsive jewelry grabbing that Sarah had witnessed with her engagement ring. This was systematic criminal enterprise conducted over years, victimizing multiple people while maintaining a public image of struggling young professional deserving family support and sympathy. "Mom, this sounds like Melissa has been committing serious crimes for a long time," Sarah said, gently but directly. "The engagement ring she stole from me was probably just one incident in a much larger pattern of theft and fraud." Carmen's response revealed her continued struggle to accept the reality of Melissa's criminal behavior despite overwhelming evidence. Even faced with documented proof of systematic theft, she continued to seek alternative explanations that would preserve her image of Melissa as victim rather than perpetrator. The lawyer thinks maybe Marcus is exaggerating things to get a better divorce settlement. You know how vindictive people can get during divorces. Maybe some of these accusations are blown out of proportion. Sarah recognized the familiar pattern of excuse-making and denial that had characterized her parents' response to Melissa's misconduct throughout their lives. Even criminal charges and comprehensive evidence couldn't overcome decades of enabling and rationalization. "Mom, if multiple people are reporting thefts after spending time with Melissa, and if there are bank records showing she profited from selling stolen items, this isn't about divorce vindictiveness. This is about criminal behavior with real victims."
The conversation ended with Carmen expressing disappointment in Sarah's unwillingness to provide financial support for Melissa's legal defense, apparently missing the irony that she was asking the victim of one theft to help fund the defense against charges for additional thefts. Over the following weeks, Sarah received periodic updates about the legal proceedings through family communications and occasional direct contact from Melissa. The picture that emerged was of comprehensive criminal charges supported by extensive evidence and testimony from multiple victims. Marcus's investigation had revealed that Melissa's theft pattern extended back to college when she had begun stealing from dorm mates and friends. The behavior had escalated over years, becoming more sophisticated as she learned to target valuable items that victims might not immediately notice were missing. The engagement ring theft had been typical of her methods. She would identify valuable items during visits to homes or social gatherings, then return later or wait for opportunities to take them without immediate detection. She had developed techniques for selling stolen goods through online platforms while creating plausible stories about their ownership. Most disturbing to Sarah was learning that Melissa had specifically targeted friends going through difficult times, calculating that their emotional distress would make them less likely to notice missing items or pursue investigation. She had stolen from Jessica Torres while Jessica dealt with a family medical crisis, and from several other friends during periods when they were too overwhelmed to maintain normal security awareness. 3 months after the initial phone call, Sarah received notification that the divorce proceedings had reached the asset division phase and that her testimony might be relevant to establishing Melissa's pattern of theft behavior. Marcus's attorney contacted her directly to request a statement about the engagement ring incident and any other relevant experiences with Melissa's misconduct. The request created an opportunity Sarah had never anticipated. After years of watching Melissa escape consequences for harmful behavior, she now had the chance to provide testimony that could ensure appropriate accountability in a legal proceeding with real implications. Sarah agreed to provide a sworn statement detailing the engagement ring theft, including the photographic evidence she had preserved documenting the ring's presence in Melissa's jewelry collection. She also provided contact information for other theft victims she had identified, giving Marcus's legal team additional resources for building their case. The deposition process was remarkably validating for Sarah. Marcus's attorney treated her testimony as important evidence rather than family drama, and the legal framework provided structure for addressing Melissa's behavior in terms of actual harm and consequences rather than emotional manipulation and excuse-making. Your sister's pattern of targeting family members and close friends for theft is particularly significant in establishing premeditation and systematic criminal behavior, the attorney explained during Sarah's deposition. The engagement ring incident demonstrates that she was willing to cause severe emotional distress to her own family members in pursuit of criminal gain. The legal perspective on Melissa's behavior provided Sarah with validation she had never received from her family. Years of being told she was too harsh or unforgiving were suddenly reframed in terms of appropriate response to criminal victimization. The divorce trial was scheduled for early December, with asset division hearings to include testimony about Melissa's theft of marital property and related criminal behavior. Sarah received a subpoena to testify about the engagement ring incident and her knowledge of Melissa's broader pattern of theft. The prospect of testifying against her sister in court would have seemed impossible to Sarah just a few years earlier, but the engagement ring theft had fundamentally altered her relationship with family loyalty concepts. She now understood that protecting criminals from consequences, even family member criminals, ultimately enabled continued victimization of innocent people. Carmen called 2 weeks before the trial with a final desperate plea for Sarah to refuse testimony or minimize the significance of the theft. The conversation revealed her continued inability to prioritize appropriate justice over family reputation management. "This testimony could send your sister to prison," Carmen said, her voice heavy with accusation and desperation. "Is that really what you want? To destroy your own family over jewelry?" Sarah's response reflected years of growth and boundary development that had occurred since her wedding. She no longer felt obligated to protect Melissa from consequences of her own choices, and she no longer accepted responsibility for family unity at the expense of justice and accountability. "Mom, I didn't destroy our family by being victimized by theft. Melissa destroyed our family by choosing to commit crimes against people who trusted her. My testimony is just truthful reporting of what she did to me and what I observed." The trial proceedings were held in Denver Family Court, the same building where Sarah had first learned about Melissa's divorce filing months earlier. She arrived wearing a navy blue suit and her grandmother's pearl necklace, but most importantly, she wore her engagement ring prominently displayed on her left hand. The ring had become more than a symbol of her marriage to David. It represented her recovery from family betrayal, her refusal to be victimized by manipulation, and her commitment to truth and accountability even when they created difficult family consequences.
Melissa was seated at the defendant's table with her court-appointed attorney, looking significantly older and more worn than she had appeared during their brief recent communications. The expensive clothes and jewelry that had characterized her appearance for years were gone, replaced by a simple dress that appeared to have been borrowed or purchased secondhand. Their eyes met briefly as Sarah entered the courtroom, and she saw recognition, followed immediately by anger and betrayal. Melissa had apparently convinced herself that Sarah would either refuse to testify or would minimize the significance of the theft to protect family relationships. Marcus appeared confident and well-prepared, surrounded by legal documentation and evidence that filled several boxes on his attorney's table. His case was clearly comprehensive and professionally assembled, in stark contrast to Melissa's minimal defense preparation. The proceedings began with testimony from Marcus about missing items and financial discrepancies that had led him to investigate Melissa's conduct. His presentation was methodical and factual, focusing on documented evidence rather than emotional appeals. When Sarah was called to testify, she approached the witness stand with nervous anticipation, but also with confidence that her testimony was accurate and important. The court reporter swore her in, as Melissa watched with obvious hostility and Carmen dabbed tears in the gallery. Marcus's attorney led Sarah through her testimony systematically, establishing her relationship to Melissa and the timeline of the engagement ring incident. Sarah described the theft discovery, the days of frantic searching, and her family's dismissive response to her distress. When you found your engagement ring in the defendant's jewelry box, what was your emotional response? The attorney asked, giving Sarah permission to describe the impact of Melissa's behavior rather than minimizing it for family harmony. I felt betrayed and violated in a way I had never experienced before. This wasn't just theft of valuable property. She had watched me suffer for days, listened to me express guilt about losing a family heirloom, and never once suggested I look in her room or admitted she had taken it. The testimony continued with Sarah describing the broader pattern of Melissa's financial misconduct that she had observed, including the expensive lifestyle that seemed inconsistent with her known income sources. She testified about friends who had experienced missing items after interacting with Melissa, establishing a pattern of behavior rather than isolated incident. During cross-examination, Melissa's attorney attempted to characterize the engagement ring incident as a misunderstanding between sisters rather than criminal theft. The questioning focused on family relationships and suggested that Sarah's testimony was motivated by personal grudges rather than factual reporting. Isn't it true that you've harbored resentment toward your sister for years over perceived favoritism by your parents? The defense attorney asked, attempting to undermine Sarah's credibility. Sarah's response was direct and factual rather than defensive.
My parents did show favoritism toward Melissa throughout our childhood, but my testimony today is about specific criminal behavior, not family dynamics. She stole my engagement ring and lied about it. Those are facts, regardless of our previous relationship. The cross-examination continued with attempts to minimize the engagement ring's value and significance, suggesting that temporary borrowing without permission didn't constitute serious theft. Sarah maintained her composure while providing clear testimony about the ring's irreplaceable sentimental value as a family heirloom and its substantial monetary worth. Would you have given your sister permission to borrow your engagement ring if she had asked? The defense attorney inquired, apparently hoping to establish that permission might have been granted if sought appropriately. No, Sarah answered without hesitation. The ring is an irreplaceable family heirloom from my husband's grandmother. It's not appropriate to borrow engagement rings, and Melissa knew that, which is why she took it secretly instead of asking. The testimony concluded with Sarah describing the impact of the theft on her relationship with her family and her wedding planning process. She explained how the incident had required her to establish boundaries to protect herself from future victimization and how it had revealed patterns of enabling behavior from her parents. As Sarah left the witness stand, she felt a sense of completion and justice that had been missing for years. She had finally been able to tell her story in a context where truth mattered more than family reputation, where evidence was valued over emotional manipulation, and where consequences would actually follow criminal behavior. The trial continued with additional testimony from other theft victims and financial experts who documented the extent of Melissa's criminal enterprise. The evidence was overwhelming and professionally presented, making conviction on multiple charges almost inevitable. During a break in proceedings, Sarah encountered Carmen in the courthouse hallway. Her mother's appearance showed the stress of watching her protected daughter finally face appropriate consequences for years of criminal behavior. "I hope you're satisfied," Carmen said bitterly. "Your sister is going to prison because of your testimony." Sarah's response reflected her growth and clarity about responsibility and accountability. "Mom, Melissa is going to prison because she committed crimes. My testimony just reported what she did to me. If you want to blame someone for her situation, blame the person who made the choice to steal from multiple people for years." Carmen's inability to accept this basic reality about cause and effect demonstrated that decades of enabling behavior had left her incapable of appropriate response, even when faced with criminal conviction of her protected child. The trial concluded with guilty verdicts on multiple charges, including theft, fraud, and criminal conversion of property. Melissa was sentenced to 18 months in state prison, followed by supervised probation and restitution requirements totaling over $40,000 to various victims. The divorce decree awarded Marcus the majority of marital assets while requiring Melissa to repay money she had stolen from their joint accounts. She was also ordered to stay away from Marcus and her property, with violations constituting automatic probation violations that could result in additional prison time. As the court session ended and Melissa was led away in handcuffs, Sarah felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was satisfaction in seeing appropriate consequences finally applied to behavior that had harmed multiple people. There was also sadness about the destruction of family relationships and the waste of Melissa's potential. Most importantly, there was peace. The engagement ring on Sarah's finger had been more than recovered. It had been vindicated through a legal process that affirmed her right to justice and accountability regardless of family relationships. Walking out of the courthouse into Denver's December afternoon, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The shy, overlooked daughter who had spent decades accepting poor treatment for the sake of family harmony had become a confident woman capable of demanding appropriate consequences for harmful behavior. The engagement ring caught the winter sunlight as she walked to her car, where David waited to hear about the trial outcome. The ring represented more than his grandmother's legacy or their marriage commitment. It symbolized Sarah's transformation from victim to survivor, from enabler to advocate for justice. David's proud smile when she described her testimony confirmed that she had made the right choice in pursuing accountability rather than family peace. Their own family, built on mutual respect and appropriate boundaries, provided a stark contrast to the dysfunction she had left behind. 6 months later, Sarah received a letter from Melissa, written from the state correctional facility where she was serving her sentence. The letter was filled with accusations, blame, and continued denial of responsibility for the consequences that had resulted from her criminal choices. Sarah read the letter once, then disposed of it without responding. She had given Melissa multiple opportunities for genuine accountability and relationship repair, all of which had been rejected in favor of continued manipulation and entitlement. Prison had apparently not created the personal growth that freedom and family enabling had failed to inspire. The engagement ring remained exactly where it belonged, on Sarah's finger, symbolizing not just her marriage, but her successful recovery from family betrayal. Justice had been served through appropriate legal channels, consequences had followed criminal behavior, and Sarah had learned to protect herself without sacrificing her integrity or compassion. Sometimes, the most loving thing family members can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when that refusal creates conflict and consequences. Sarah had discovered that true family loyalty meant supporting what was right rather than simply protecting what was familiar. The ring sparkled as she prepared dinner in the kitchen of the home she shared with David, surrounded by evidence of a life built on honesty, mutual respect, and appropriate boundaries. It was a life that had been worth fighting for, worth testifying for, and worth the difficult process of holding family members accountable for their choices. Her sister's freedom had been lost through criminal conviction, but Sarah's freedom had been gained through the courage to demand justice and accountability regardless of family pressure. The engagement ring served as a daily reminder that some things are worth protecting, and that sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to be victimized again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.